Hi, everybody. Welcome to the houseatwork.com home repair clinic. My name is Jim Salmon.
I'm Peter Schick.
And you're Peter Schick.
Yes, I am. Yeah, here I am.
Today, we're going to talk about home repair, water heaters, air conditioning, maybe a little wet basement action as we're going along.
Yeah, it's a lot of the things we've been hearing on your show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially the water heater piece, like selection of it, maintenance of it, just pretty much anything, whether it's a tankless or one that has a tank. Whatever it is, we've just been getting a lot of questions on that. So we'll be, we'll just be figuring out what we can, what knowledge we can drop on you.
There you go. Pretty much everybody has a water heater. And, we'll get into that here in a second, but I thought we'd take a minute or so and introduce ourselves. Why don't you, Peter Schick, why don't you start with that and tell the folks who you are.
So I'm Peter Schick. I'm a real estate agent here in Rochester, New York. I mostly focus on income properties and also flips. I do some of the work myself for the flips that I do. And I do some residential work in terms of representing clients for single family stuff, but mostly in income properties and flips.
So basically what you just said there is you have a lot of money.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, maybe the bank helps me out with certain things, you know. I wouldn't go that far, you know.
That's a great subject too, is to talk flips, because there's a lot of people doing that. But I'll just take a minute and introduce myself. My name is Jim Salmon. And I am a home inspector here in the Rochester, New York area. I'm also...
you're one of my nemesis as a real estate agent, yeah.
It's going to be great. Therein lies a show, let me tell you.
Exactly, yeah.
So I do home inspections, pre-purchase home inspections for people that are buying a house, or people that are getting ready to sell their house, or people that are buying commercial buildings or whatever. You hire me to go in there and look at it for you, and we meet and talk about it and whatever, and it's all good.
Well, let me just tell you one thing about Jim here. I've heard through the grapevine throughout town, working with other homeowners, working with other agents. This guy's a nightmare for a lot of them, because he will point out these tiny, minuscule things, and then the next thing you know, the buyer's getting something saying from the engineer's inspection, this needs to get fixed.
There you go.
And they always remember it, and it makes guys like me want to pull my hair out. When I have to deal with some of these little fixes, like, come on, let's just close this. Let's just get on with our lives.
Whenever I show up to do a home inspection, the real estate folks are usually there, and my clients there, who I usually haven't met, and they don't know, whatever. So I start out, and I make everybody calm and explain that I'm here for you. I represent you. And you should see the agent's eyes rolling. You're not here for him. But anyway, so therein lies another show. I'm also for the past 30 years almost, the host of the Home Repair Clinic radio programs on News Radio Wham 1180 in Rochester, New York. You can listen to those shows on wham1180.com or my website at jimsalmon.com. Also run the website, which as you do too. So it's we're busy guys.
Yep, and, making it happen.
So we thought we'd come in here and start it off today with water heaters.
Yeah, as we discussed.
We on a radio program we get tons and tons of people calling in. My water heater makes noise. It leaks. It didn't last long. Or how long will it last? All great questions. So we thought we'd cover most of that today.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I've heard a lot, and I've actually experienced this, is when it starts leaking. And to me, so many people, they don't want to bite the bullet, but there's only so much you can do at that point. And that, to me, now you have more experience with this, but to me, that signals, that's a big red flag to me. This thing needs to get replaced.
Yeah, when it leaks, it still may be working for a few days after that, but if it's leaking out of the bottom, that means there's a pinhole in the bottom of the tank inside, and people think, wow, how can it leak? It's glass lined. Well, you don't understand. It's not like a thermos bottle with this big, thick glass liner. It's just got a little bit of stuff sprayed on the inside of the tank, and some of that just wears away, and some impurities sometimes, and it leaks on the floor, and you're done.
Yeah. And there's only so many years that these things are going to last. I mean, if you get maybe a dozen years out of it, it's gone its course. It's run its course.
Exactly right. 12 years is the average life expectancy of a modern gas water heater. Now, sometimes you can squeeze a little bit more out of an electric one by replacing elements or whatever, but usually it's 12 in and out with
now,
a gas
this is a good thing to kind of dovetail off of the electric one. because the place I just got has an electric one in it. And they say because of it, that hurts your utility bill, meaning it's going to cost a lot more to actually have electric one over a gas one.
Right.
That's what I've heard. Now, is that just a myth, or is that more of kind of like, yeah, that's more grounded in fact?
Yeah, it can. It's not a myth. It is true, but it's not true in every part of the country. Some parts of the United States of America, electricity is extremely inexpensive, and it makes sense. But other parts, like our area here, where the municipal electric rates are very, very high, unless you get into an area that has its town, if you will, that has its own municipal electric. Now, sometimes there you can really save money, and it makes sense. But
yeah, like here in Rochester, Fairport Electric is kind of a
right.
That's a big deal there, where that's a good reason to move there. Because
I think we have 3 or 4 of those around here: Fairport, New York; Churchville, Holly, New York.
Yep.
All have their town municipal electric companies that were set up years ago. They buy their own power, and the folks get the benefit of the reduced price on that.
Yep.
I still think, though, that natural gas-fired water heaters, natural gas being very, very inexpensive right now. So it's been that way for years, and I don't see it changing too much. So gas is usually the way to
now,
go.
is there more of is there efficiency concerns with that, namely between electric and natural gas? I've been led to believe
An electric water heater is 100% efficient because every watt, a watt is a watt. It goes in, it comes out.
Yep.
And for every electric whatever that goes in there, you get the same amount of heat
Interesting,
back
because I've heard kind of this myth going around where it's more of gas is more efficient.
That's
than
not true.
Okay.
That's
that
because
actually
it
makes
has
sense because
it has
it's
a flue.
radiating. Yeah.
I mean, there's a waste byproduct of it.
Exactly.
Even though modern power vented water heaters and even on demand water heaters are extremely efficient in the between 90 and 97%, depending on the ones you buy. That still means there is some waste that comes out of there. So it's not 100 like electricity.
It's actually very interesting because that is a very commonly held thing that I've heard from many people, many homeowners I talk to. They're like, oh, yes, the natural gas, that's so much more efficient. I want that. Yeah. But that's not necessarily true.
No, it isn't. But most of the time, it makes more sense to do gas than it does electric, unless you live in one of those towns we just talked about. Now, there's several kinds of water heaters. A regular atmospheric drafting water heater, they're still available, and the building codes changed a little bit, so we're not on 3-inch flues anymore. They all have to be 4-inch.
Yep.
And those need to vent into a chimney. And then there's power vented water heaters, which use up, they're so much more efficient that what's left is about a 90-degree temperature flue gas, and you can vent with plastic.
Interesting.
So you go right out the sidewall. You don't need the...
so you don't need to worry about connecting that to a chimney or anything else. That could just pretty much, you could treat the flue essentially like how you treat a dryer vent, more or less. Okay.
The only drawback with that, though, is that we grew up with atmospheric water heaters, and when the power was out, the water heater still worked. With a power vented water heater, there's a fan on top of it that blows the flue gases out, and if that's not operating, the gas valve won't turn on, so thus you don't get hot water.
Yeah, exactly. That actually brings up an interesting point because here in Rochester a few months ago we had this really bad blackout, and it was March or so because of the windstorm.
Yeah, it was out. Some of the houses were out for 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we weren't the only ones. I want to say it's because I have family who live in Wisconsin, and they had a windstorm there, and that windstorm came here like a week later because my folks they were living in Madison, Wisconsin, and they had a power outage too, and that preceded ours by a few days. So, and I remember during this, I had the water heater you were mentioning. And I was like, thank you so much I still have hot water right now. Yeah. I might not have heat, but I have hot water because that was the one thing where if I didn't have the hot water, I'm getting a hotel.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I was already contingency
planning. If you get too cold because the furnace isn't on, you can get in the water heater and you can get in the shower and get warm at least.
Exactly. You have that working for you. So. And I always thought about that, and I was like, well, if this goes, I'm going to a hotel.
There you go.
I mean, that was kind of like the decision point.
Now, the evolution of water heaters, of course, have gone to on-demand water heaters, which are vastly different. They're square, rectangular boxes that mount to the wall.
It doesn't take up nearly as much space.
Europe has had these types of water heaters for 50 years. And, of course, we're a little slow on this. And when they started here 10, 15 years ago, they were all vented with metal, which was a challenge. And then once we got to high efficiency on these, now they're all vented with plastic. And a typical house, a 2,000 square foot house with 2.5 bathrooms, 180 to 200,000 BTU on-demand water heater is what I see a lot of times out there as a home inspector.
That's interesting.
Now, there are some problems with it, but
what
like
are some of the
anything else.
problems? Because everybody talks up the on-demand ones.
I'm not a big fan of on-demand water heaters. I'll be honest with you. Now,
Okay.
you take a family of 5, okay? And I don't know about your house, but you're a little younger than I am. But these, when the kids are running around, the dogs and the whole stuff and whatever, I mean, showers, there's a dishwasher, the laundry's going every single day. Sometimes you get into this a little bit, and the on-demand water heater can't really keep up like you would like it to. So you have to have rules. Like when somebody's in the shower, the D-dub isn't running,
so it's not necessarily as warm as you would potentially like it to be?
No, it's a volume thing, too.
Okay.
It can only process so much hot water at once. When it's working, it's constant. But if you have, 3 or 4 things on, sometimes it just
I see.
just
So
can't
there's
keep
only
up.
so much stress the system can take in terms of.
But you're right, though. It does
providing-
turn into temperature. I mean, if there's 3 things running and then you put a 4th thing on there and it's not able to keep up with that, the water won't be as warm. And then there's a point where the on-demand water heater needs a certain amount of pressure and volume flowing through it to actually turn on. So sometimes you run into issues with that.
I see. And I think another issue that's actually worth bringing up with that is now up here, we don't have issues with water.
Yeah, we have tons of water.
We have tons of water. We have no issues with that, essentially.
Actually, we had too much water.
Yeah, exactly. We've had too much water recently.
Yes,
I will
we have.
definitely say that much. And I think our friends on the lake will agree with us. But say I'd say around a year ago, like California, Texas, they were going through a pretty severe drought. And so now water consumption is going to start becoming more and more of a concern. Now, I would assume that having an on-demand water heater would make it where you wouldn't necessarily think about your water consumption as much. Meaning where it's kind of like if you have a water heater tank, you start running out of hot water, it makes you think, well, I'm not going to use as much water.
I never thought about that before, but now that you mention that, that's not a bad idea because I have friends that routinely drain down, clean their hot tub, and refill it with their on-demand water heater, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then, only an idiot would do that. And then some people, try to get the swimming pool up to the right temperature with their on-demand water heaters. And you think, if money's no object, whatever, but it does give you the ability to not have to worry about all you have is 40 or 50 gallons and you're out. This thing will go forever.
Yep.
So from that aspect, maybe you do things you wouldn't normally do.
Yep. Where there isn't that kind of check where, okay, I'm running out, I'm not going to run the hot water shower.
People ask me all the time, what do you think of those on-demand water heaters? And I go, well, okay, if your situation is good for that, then that's okay. What would make it good? Okay, maybe you're not home a lot.
Yeah.
Right? You go to Florida for 6 months. Perfect. Your water heater's on, and you don't have you have used no gas in those 6 months you're in Florida. You come back, you fire it up, and away you go.
Yep.
Now, with a tank water heater, you have the ability to put it on vacation setting, but you're still...
Yeah, but how many people actually do that? Because that's the other thing. It's only as good as the that homeowner's knowledge of the actual thing. Because I've done that before. I have, but not very often. It's not one of the things that's on my top of my checklist when I'm going on vacation.
We can do a whole show on what to do when you're gone for a few months in your house. And you're right. That's that does happen. But I think that when it comes to on demand, it has to be perfectly tailored for your family. For 1 or 2 people, perfect. Perfect.
I agree.
Now, one of the biggest complaints I get about water heaters are the noise they make. There's a ton of different noises that water heaters make. An electric water heater, for instance, produces a humming noise.
I've heard that one.
And that's normal. I mean, there's not a lot you can do with that.
Yep.
The older the element, the more you might find that it makes humming noises.
Okay.
You always have the ability to change out the elements, which are $25 a piece. They're not that expensive. Rumbling, popping, and cracking noise is all usually associated with a gas water heater.
Yep.
And those are mineral deposits and stuff on the bottom of the tank. Every once in a while, I'll show up at a house and do a home inspection, And the homeowner's so proud of his 1954 John Wood Penfield water heater. That's and what
Still kicking.
What he doesn't understand is you're heating through 8 inches of slag in the bottom of
Yep.
that tank before you get to any water. So it's grossly inefficient.
Super inefficient. Yeah.
So
super inefficient.
calcium lime deposits make those noises, rumbling noises. Sometimes some water heaters produce a little bit of hydrogen gas from the heating process, which can pocket at the top of the water heater. And then when you turn on a hot faucet, you get that gas coming out. It's spitting.
yeah.
You know, that's not the rule, but it does happen sometimes.
Now, one thing, well, and you mentioned kind of some of the noises it might make. I think I don't want people to necessarily mistake that with, like, say, if you have a boiler. I mean, that's a whole different.
that's another
that's
whole
a
animal.
whole. That's a whole other animal there, because you'll hear the clanking and everything else, but that's more from air in the line or whatnot. So that's you hear that noise. That's not necessarily your water heater. That's your boiler. So
I've been in buildings where the water heater is actually screaming, and it's like a sizzling scream, very annoying. And then I'll go up to a valve, and the valve's like halfway shut for some reason. I'll open a valve, and it completely stops. Screaming noises with water heaters come from water passing through a smaller opening for some reason. And every once in a while, your kid climbs up on a ladder and he shuts a valve halfway off or something like that. It's all weird.
When you're trying to shut off something else, say you're putting in a new vanity or something, you got to shut off the water, and then forget about Yep.
Water hammers happen a lot and so does thermal expansion with water heaters. There's a temperature and pressure relief valve on the side of the water heater.
Yep.
With a discharge tube that's supposed to take it down to about 6 inches to the floor. In my career, 3 or 4 times, I've had those just go off in proximity to me, and that's scalding water. That's why the discharge tube.
Yes, the discharge tube, that's really important, that it's actually going all the way to the ground. Now,
I think that if I used to work in the home center business, and people would come in, the temperature and pressure relief valve leaks, and they thought it was the temperature and pressure relief valve. So they buy another one, take it home, and they bring that one back, says, this one's bad too, it leaks also. But it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Yes,
There's
it's
nothing wrong with
relieving the pressure. Now, there could be issues, what I've seen with some of the pressure release valves, where like the O-ring, the rubber O-ring that's on that, like if you don't, it could start getting, over time, that starts drying out, starts cracking, then it's always going to be kind of leaking.
Yeah.
Have you seen a lot of that before?
Yeah, we see that once in a while. Especially if your water heater is very old and it's never leaked and nobody's ever flipped it, don't touch that switch. Don't touch that handle on there.
Yeah,
I mean,
just leave it alone.
because once you do that, it's going to continue to leak, and then you're into an issue.
Yeah.
But the thing that happens with these is when you heat water, you create pressure, right?
Yep.
And some houses have backflow preventers near the water meter. It's either in the pressure reducing valve or whatever, and it won't allow water that's already been in your house, the pressure, to exceed the street pressure and push that water that's already been in your house back down to the municipal system where it goes to your neighbor. That's not potable. We don't want to do that.
No.
So many houses have backflow preventers that won't let that happen. But the downside of that is some plumbing systems, you heat water and it creates enough pressure to bring it up to 150 pounds, and it weeps off on the T&P valve on the water heater.
Yep.
And I see people put caps on them. We don't want that.
No. Let it do its thing.
Every once in a while, every year, there's a couple of water heaters that blow up in the United States, and you see pictures of the thing like a rocket going through the second floor and out the roof. The T&P valve is there to act as the first line of defense against the thing sticking on wide open and then blowing up, like a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So anyway, don't ever put a cap on there. But certain houses have this thermal expansion issue, and it's solved very easily by installing a 1-gallon X-Trol tank or pressure tank. It has a bladder in it. It's about half full of air and half full of water, and that absorbs the fluctuations in pressure. So
so it's an expansion tank essentially. Okay.
You install that as close to the hot side as you can.
Yep.
And that just acts as a protector on that. And once you install that, I would say that maybe 10-15% of the houses that I inspect have small expansion tanks.
Yeah,
near
I think
the water
that's
heater.
I see that fairly regularly too.
So.
Now, one of the things that I think if you're a layman and you have one of these and the pressure release valve does weep a little water, And I think a lot of people, the problem is they think that, like you said, it's broken, so then I plug it up. But no, that isn't
Don't
the
do
case. Don't do that. Let it do its thing. It's working. It's working its magic is what it's doing.
Also, those pressure tanks will help if you have a water hammer problem.
Yep.
Especially those of you that have PEX plumbing, which is a plastic.
Yep.
Evolution plumbing.
I've been seeing that a lot more now.
PEX is
recently.
great.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of brands of that,
Yep.
but PEX is the main brand that we have around here in the fittings and whatever. And I have a plumber buddy who, whenever I need plumbing work done, I just borrow his PEX tools. And,
Yep.
and there's a little tool chest here with all the fittings in there, and I don't know how much they are because I never have to pay them. So,
Well, yeah, I'll tell you this is a lot cheaper than say like copper pipe.
Oh, yeah? It is.
I
Copper's
will
nuts
go
right
with
now.
that all day long. I'll go with the flex piping.
but the that pressure tank can also help you with water hammer noises. And the reason I brought up PEX is that sometimes with plastic plumbing, they seem to maybe on a bathroom vanity or a kitchen sink or whatever, you develop a water hammer noise, which is like that machine gun
Yep.
type sound effect.
Yeah, I know that one.
And most of the plastic plumbing companies like PEX make a little shock absorber that can be installed under the sink for those. So that's, sometimes the one you install in the water heater will help throughout the house with water hammers. So,
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
so have we exhausted water heaters? Should we move on to...
No, that we went
conditioning.
really long with
Yeah.
the water heaters
Yeah, that's
there.
good. Well,
Yeah.
there's a lot of, this would be a good time to introduce ourselves again. My name's Jim Salmon. His name is Peter Schick. And houseatwork.com, home repair clinic.
Yes, sir.
Is what you're listening to. And we do have an email address where if people would like to write in, we'll deal with the answers on the podcast.
Yep. If you write us at contact us, all one word, at houseatwork.com, you send us your question, and we'll do our best to answer it for you. And there's a good chance we might actually bring it up on the podcast.
Yeah. Now, this time of year, being, early June, we're starting to think about, especially around here, the temperatures in the 80s,
Yep.
air conditioning's firing
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Summer finally came here, and it's been pretty cold up to this point. Well, I'd say unseasonably cool. We'll call it. I won't say cold, but unseasonably cool. But now everybody's starting to think. Of course, it's not a problem until it is. Now people have their mind on AC units, fixing their AC if it's not working right now. So yeah, as you said.
After, I don't know, how do I put this? After wintertime, when all the covers are now off of the air conditioner compressor cabinets that are outside, you look for the ones that have the U-shaped dent in them from the ice dam that fell off the roof.
Yeah, from the gutter, and it just
Yeah.
smashes
And
it. Yep.
Those are done. I
Yep.
mean, that's a replacement type of thing. I've seen them where the dents go 10 inches into the top of the cabinet. It's
Now,
just like
what an
crazy.
interesting question would be: would insurance cover that? That'd be
Gosh, good question.
because you think it's like, well, it was an ice dam that formed on my gutter and it fell. What are you going to do about it? It's kind of like if a tree falls on your house. Maybe.
I would say yes. to
Yeah,
that.
that's kind of what
think
I was
so.
leaning towards as well. So if I had my homeowner's policy, I call them up, say, hey, I had an ice dam fall on my AC unit. Can I get a new AC unit? I mean, if they didn't cover that, I'd be kind of scratching my head.
Now, if it was an asteroid or something, that's another whole matter. They don't cover that. I already know that. If your air conditioner has some damage, and obviously all you have to do is take a quick look at it. If it has some damage, then you get a heating professional in there to check
Yep.
it out, because most homeowners are not. 99.9% of the homeowners are not qualified to do anything to their
No,
AC.
I wouldn't even touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The only
don't
thing
even
you
mess
could
with it.
do, I also noticed this week in our area, the cottonwood trees are producing.
Yep. Yeah, they
and
are.
Cottonwood floating around can take and completely cover and mat over an air conditioner compressor cabinet. Now, most people think that air conditioners are somehow making cold air magically and
Yeah,
bringing
you just
it in.
have some elves working in there,
Yes,
just
exactly.
turning a few wrenches, making the fan spin.
When in reality, what an air conditioner does is takes heat out of your house, out to that compressor cabinet, and giving it off, thus cooling your home. You take the heat out, it gets cooler. So if these the little fins, like radiator fins around the outside of the compressor cabinet, are all filled up with cottonwood and matted over. It can't give off as much heat, so therefore it becomes much less efficient. So if your AC unit is, let's say 12 to 15 years old, it's in the last certainly quarter of its life.
Yep. I've seen some that have lasted 20 years and they're still on like Freon and everything else. And it's like people asking, hey, can I salvage this? It's like, I don't even think you could buy you can't even buy like the coolant anymore for that.
It's a behemoth.
Yeah.
It's an albatross.
Yeah.
Freon is R22 coolant, and R22 coolant was what we used for 50 years. It was great.
Yep.
Well, let me put it this way: it was cheap and it was available, and it made air conditioning affordable for most Americans over the past, since the 40s. And it's called a hydrochlorofluorocarbon. And
that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it's a big mouthful. And the chloral part of it, the way I understand, and I'm not a scientist guy, which you probably can already tell, they say destroys the ozone layer.
Yeah.
All right. So now in comes more modern coolants, which are actually hydrofluorocarbons instead of hydrochlorofluorocarbons.
Okay. I almost feel like you're really splitting hairs,
really.
but I'm sure there's like some really big difference, like you stated between those.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a government money grab. Every air conditioner eventually needs to be replaced. Every refrigerator coolant got changed.
Yeah.
It was a money grab. And I'd love to know who started it. The ozone layer.
They're rolling in the dough now, whoever they are.
I don't sign on to a lot of traditional things that a lot of people sign on to. So if you're listening to this and you do believe in the whole global warming thing and the fact the ozone layer was destroyed by Freon, then I apologize. Please don't take it personal. It's just my opinion. But, R22 is no longer available in
yeah, that's what I've heard. The only way you can get that is if, like, I don't know.
It's like $200 and something a pint now, too.
Yeah.
So if you have an
it's
old
very rare. You have to really go out of your way to find it. And if you do find it, is it really worth it to actually, you might as well just bite the bullet, get the new one.
The other part of that is most of the coolants that we're using now, the coolant we're using now is R410A.
Yep.
Which is actually better than Freon. It can transfer more heat, in the chemical process from your house to the cabinet than Freon could. But it has other things. People ask me all the time, well, can I use the long copper tubes that go from my furnace, from the A coil above my furnace to the compressor cabinet outside? Can I reuse that? The answer is no. It's contaminated with the oils and the Freon and the stuff that was in there to begin with, and it's not compatible at all with the new refrigerants and the oils that they use to lubricate them. So unfortunately,
so it's not as easy as just wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Here's a new AC unit.
No.
There needs to be actually some significant plumbing work that's actually going to have to take place.
The A coil above your furnace, and you can't see it because it's in a plenum, if you will. And what that does is it allows the heat that comes through that plenum to be transferred through the copper into the coolant, where it's then pumped outside and given off at the compressor cabinet by the fan. None of that can be reused. So that means they have to take apart that plenum and replace the A coil. The A coil can't be reused. And then the whole compressor cabinet, one of the biggest differences between R22 and R410A is the pressure in the system. I don't know exactly how much more, but our R410A is a lot more. Yeah.
Okay.
So what that meant is the folks, Trane and Lennox and all those guys making modern compressor cabinets had to make a better compressor.
Yeah, it has to withstand those additional pressures.
Right, exactly.
Okay. I did not realize that, I didn't realize that there was that much difference in the plumbing that has to be worked on.
It's 50% more pressure in that line, R410A, than it is R22. So.
Oh, wow. That is significant. That is really significant.
Yeah, so I it's all good, but the coolants work today. They work very well. And as long as the system's properly installed and that's a mouthful too, because that doesn't always happen. I mean, you as a heating guy, you have to start somewhere.
Yep.
So learning how to put this all together is not a perfect science. You want to do your research.
Yep.
And find out who's the best in your town when it comes to installing that kind of
No,
stuff.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, that's not something you on the job training you're really going to do. You're going to have to
Like
have an idea.
anything else, you know,
Yeah.
you had to start out day one writing your first real estate offer.
Yep,
offer.
exactly. You
And I had
just-
to do my first
yep.
home inspection. I know right where that house is too. And, so, the bottom line on that is you get lots of estimates. You do your homework. We'll talk about the SEER rating here in a second, but as far as maintenance is concerned, when they install that compressor cabinet outside, first of all, it has to be level. There's a coolant
Yep.
sensor in there or coolant heater, if you will, that maintains a certain temperature of the heater so that when you turn it on, it works properly. That's why if you turn the breaker off to your air conditioner, in the wintertime before you operate it, you can't just flip the switch and go. You need to
Yep.
make sure it's on a day so that everything can be even.
Exactly.
And when they install that compressor cabinet, you don't want it right up against the house. Now,
yeah,
most
you need,
people,
you need a little space.
yeah, what I operate on is about 2 feet all the way around. That way, that can give off the heat and be as efficient as it possibly can. That's
No, that
my
makes
opinion,
sense.
so.
That makes sense.
And I find ivy growing all over them in Pachysandra, and people plant shrubs on either side because
Yeah.
they don't want to look at it. I get that, but it's all about how much it costs you to operate it and whether it really cools your house or not.
Exactly.
That's
exactly. Now, when you're selecting who to go with in terms of installing one of these, like an HVAC contractor, what are some of the things that you could kind of look for to make sure, hey, they're kind of doing the right thing? Say I'm a layman, I don't really know. Like, what are some things, basic things that you should look for?
All right, here's the deal. A guy shows up, you call him, makes an appointment. He showed up on time, which is good.
Oh, yeah.
He walks down in the basement, and he looks at the furnace. He goes out and looks at the compressor cabinet. You have a 3-ton unit, and your house is, let's say, 2,500 square feet. And he says, okay, we'll quote you a 3-ton unit. That's a mistake.
Yeah.
What is in there in a furnace and what is in there in an air conditioner isn't necessarily the right one for that house. Things have changed a lot.
Yep.
If you have a house that was built in 1950 and had 1 inch of insulation in your attic, and then 2 years ago you tore that all out of there and had your house spray foamed with closed cell
That's a lot
polyurethane.
more efficient.
Right.
Yep.
Whoever comes to your house to quote a heating or air conditioning system needs to do some heat loss calculations on your house and make sure the right one is there, especially with furnaces.
Very, very
100,000 in, 100,000 out. And many times not. I mean, the design efficiencies have changed.
Exactly. Same thing with the efficiencies of the AC unit itself.
Right.
And in the past 10 years, they've gotten better.
Right.
And the same thing with the furnace itself. They've gotten more efficient. So they're going to need less power to be able to do more, essentially.
Right.
So they just need an energy audit is essentially. Energy audit, would that be the best way to describe it?
That's one way, although most experienced heating contractor guys and gals can look at a house, inspect what they need, and be able to determine what goes there.
Oh, okay.
So I would trust, their intuition on a particular house too.
Okay.
That's part of what you're paying for. Is the guy's got to know what the right one is to put in your house, and then the installation should be pretty. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be ugly. There shouldn't be jagged edges of things, and it should be sealed up nicely. I can tell every once in a while I'll walk into a house and I'm thinking to myself, wow, who put this in? This is really great. Or then, oh my gosh, I got to be careful I don't get cut when I'm
the spray
inspecting
foam all
Yeah.
over the place. Yeah.
So it's a lot of that. A bigger company isn't necessarily the best because they have 25 trucks, and
That's true.
You're only as good as your worst or newest guy. So, I'm not sure the biggest company is always the best, but then you don't want a guy that's just doesn't have a good reputation either. There's plenty of ways to check people's reputation.
Yep.
So the internet's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
So, one of the misconceptions about air conditioning is people think that somehow it uses the coolant, like it burns Freon or it burns R410A.
I've heard that one too. I've heard that one a lot.
I represent Trane Heating and Air Conditioning Systems on my radio program, and Trane did a study, if you will, about why systems fail, why they leak, and all of a sudden you have low coolant because it's a closed system.
Yep.
It doesn't use coolant. It's supposed to just continue forever. What it turned out to be was formaldehyde in every house. Every house has a ton of formaldehyde.
Really?
You
Where
don't
is this-
know it, and some people are more sensitized to it than others. Kitchen countertops and particle
Oh yeah,
board.
this was the same thing with lumber liquidators.
Yeah, yeah,
a
very
little
similar
while
to
ago.
that.
They had very high amounts of formaldehyde in the flooring that they sold. I'm
right.
gonna say, yeah.
That is part of what's going on here, but it doesn't even have to be anywhere near the action levels for having too much of this. It can be just a very small amount, and somehow it is attracted to the A coil inside because the cold air return is passing air.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it
Interesting.
created these little teeny weeny pinholes in the A coil, which then leaked extremely slowly. And next thing you know, you're out of coolant.
Oh, there you go. So that's how a closed system. I see now.
And your heating guy shows up, right? And he's got a little detector that he can check for coolant leaks, right?
Yep.
And he's tightening all the fittings. He's looking at all the usual suspects. And he goes, I don't see any leaks here. So he takes out the coolant and he fills it back up again. And it might be a week later, it might be 2 years later. You're right back where you started because
Yeah.
it has these little
He
teeny
never,
holes.
and the original problem never got fixed.
Right.
The coil never got replaced.
Right.
When it was just, hey, I'll do what the customer is telling me. Replace the coolant.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the problem.
Yeah.
The underlying issue.
Right.
So that makes sense.
So anyway, don't believe that your unit uses coolant at all because it doesn't.
You know what? You learn something every day, and wow, I didn't realize that, especially with the formaldehyde piece. That's interesting.
The next thing we probably ought to talk about while we're on air conditioning and how are we doing time wise? We all right?
We're like that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, wow. We've
We're having fun.
yeah, we're doing it. Do it.
Air conditioners are rated by what's called the SEER rating, Seasonal Energy Efficiency Quotient, or something like that. It's not like
Yeah, quotient, whatever, man. You know, it's something like that.
And it was, it's interesting because the government mandate, when they stick their nose.
Oh,
in
you and
stuff,
your government
Yeah,
mandates. I know you love them, Jim.
they mandated a SEER rating of 13 or better.
Okay, so how does this? Yeah, well, you're about to tell me how does this actually work.
So it's and I have to go backwards and reread this thing. It's all done on a calculation of how much money it costs to cool something to a certain degree.
Okay.
So they come up with these ratings, and for years we were in the 13 to 15 range. 16 was when the 16s came out, maybe 8 years ago. That was great. Now we're in the 18, 20, and 22 to 23.
Oh wow. Okay.
SEER ratings, which seasonal energy efficiency ratio.
There you
That's
go,
the proper
ratio.
term, yeah.
There you go, ratio.
The older you get, the small print. So most people are buying the 13 to 16s because they're pretty inexpensive. For those folks where money's no object, or you're buying a new house and you fold it into your mortgage or whatever.
Yep.
You buy as efficient an air conditioner as you could get your hands on. These systems can be $10,000, $15,000.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That much.
And the 13s can be in the 65 to 85 range.
Oh, wow.
Well, I'm talking doing furnace and air conditioning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was about to say. I was thinking AC alone. I was thinking, okay, I'm thinking the numbers like 4,000, 5,000, something like that, depending on square footage.
Well, there's always the low end.
Yep.
And there's always somebody out there, and because this is America and this is how we operate, the better price sometimes wins. And there are air conditioners, the whole thing start to finish for $2,500. And then you stick a furnace in there, so maybe you're at $4,400, $4,500.
Now, this is one thing that I always, when I talk with a lot of homeowners that they need to understand is you're not always, it's very seldom you're ever going to get quality and low price. This is one of the things I've always heard where it's like, hey, I'm going to get the rock bottom price, but I'm also going to get the highest of quality.
The thing I disagree with that on is wine.
Wine?
But I think, by and large,
Oh, yeah.
when something's
what you're
less
saying.
expensive, you're right. When something's less expensive, there's something not there. And
Well, wines are a little different when you bring that up. I saw some show where they talked about this guy who just rebottled like some box wine and then like sold it for
raised
like
double the price.
or did like he made it seem like it was some vintage like 1950 whatever and sold it for like $1,000. You know, I mean, okay, there's an exception. That is an exception right there, Jim.
All right, you're listening, folks, to the houseatwork.com home repair clinic here. Hope you enjoyed our podcast. My name's Jim Salmon.
Name's Peter Schick.
And we will be back with another podcast soon. Tune in.